This is the Elder Dragon Gogmazios. And after facing off against it for the first time, I had to ask myself an uncomfortable question. In a series about fighting world-ending dragons, is this the best one? Well, after defeating it over a dozen more times and learning all the brilliant tricks and details in this encounter, I think I finally have my answer. And all things considered, it's not that surprising. Okay, so nearly every single aspect of this fight can be categorized into one of two boxes: problems and solutions. These categories are not unique to Gogmazios by any means. However, the level of rigidity in these problems and solutions is perhaps higher than any other monster in the game. Let's zoom in and take a closer look at the biggest problem in each phase of the fight and how you solve them to see where that rigidity comes from. We'll start with phase 1. Despite the colossal frame, this dragon is astonishingly fast. Yet, as you'd expect, the Elder Dragon larger than your local shopping center has a ton of health. These two qualities conflict with each other and create our first problem. I want you to imagine two bosses, one that's fast and one that's slow. Assuming all other qualities are exactly the same, which boss do you think you could hit more often? Probably the slow one, right? I mean, this isn't exactly rocket science. Naturally then, the slower boss would need more health to compensate for the fact that it's going to take more hits. We can see this in Wilds by looking at the base health pools of monsters like Blanganga and Raidao next to significantly slower monsters like Ajarakan or Uthduna. If a slower monster had low health, they'd be way too easy, and if a fast monster had high health, that'd be a problem too. How does this combination work with Gogmazios then? Well, this is where our first solution comes in. As we go through these solutions, I want you to grab a folder and keep this question in it for later. Where are all of these solutions coming from, and what do they have in common? See if you can figure out the answer before the end. So the first phase of this fight takes place in a wide open cave. Strangely, there are these torch pods that you can find scattered about the arena. These aren't for dealing damage though, not directly. Look over there. Notice how right next to that super subtle subscribe button, there's some steam coming out of the ground? I'm not much of a scientist, so I can't tell you exactly how this chemical reaction works, but if you launch the torch pods at those steaming spots, they'll erupt with a plume of magma. If Gogmazios is standing on top of those plumes, that eruption will deal a few thousand damage to the boss's health. For reference, a single combo with the consensus greatest weapon of all time, the Switch Axe, only deals around 2,000 damage in 10 seconds of wailing away on a standing target. These lava plumes deal multiple times as much without having to take a single swing. This is how Gog is able to get away with having so much health while still being as fast as it is. The second phase has plenty of this as well. Now Gogmazios isn't sprinting all over the place, it's relatively stationary, but you absolutely must knock this cannon off of its back, and to reach the dragon's back, you need to knock it down first. That's our next problem, and just like before, we've got a clear solution. There are these explosive boulders that you can roll over to the boss for some free damage, along with this massive chunk of metal that can be dropped onto its head and even knock it down. Lastly, there's the Ancient Forge, which is effectively an enormous spiked piston that'll once again deal a ton of damage and get you a free knockdown so you can target the back. Alternatively, you can choose to ignore all of this and take matters into your own hands by attacking the dragon's arms until it eventually falls. The reason it's so important to break this cannon off the boss's back is due to the total health pool. Now, take this with a grain of salt, since as I'm writing this, the boss has only been out for a few days. For now though, we know the boss probably has a health pool in the hundreds of thousands, which makes it practically necessary to use the ancient weapon, the Convergent Elder Breaker. Crazy name, by the way. As the name suggests, this is a super weapon designed to take down Elder Dragons. It's also the solution to the problem of the boss's gargantuan health pool and our ticket to phase 3. Actually using the weapon requires a fair bit of work. After knocking it off the dragon's back, you need to grab these cables and slowly drag them over to the cannon, all while Gogmazios is still actively attacking you. Thankfully, the other players in the hunt, or NPCs if you choose to play solo, will help you with this by both distracting Gog and dragging the cables over as well. Once you've plugged all of them in, you still have to wait for it to charge up. The longer it charges, the more damage it does, so ideally you want to wait until 100%. Finally, once you hit 100 and aim the cannon with a beam that's almost too large to miss, and that's our solution to phase 2. After an extremely valid crash out from Gogmazios, we climb the rubble and find ourselves in the final phase of the fight. This is also the location of the most dangerous problem of all, and part of that is because it's actually two problems mixed into one. Let's start with flight. During this phase, the dragon remembers that it has wings and can just camp while raining down fire from the sky. While its agile movement in phase 1 made it tough to hit, this makes it nearly impossible. You can sneak in a few hits on the tail until that eventually comes off, but like every other phase of this fight, there's a much better solution here. There are these Yeah, those, thank you. If charged and aimed correctly, these deal around 500 damage per hit, and with up to 8 hunters launching them at the same time, the damage can build up pretty fast. You've also once again got hazards in the environment that you can now use to knock Gogmazios out of the sky for a few free hits. What makes this phase different from the previous two is the second half of this problem. During this phase, you have to use the dragon element to suppress Gog's power. Yes, those deal dragon damage, as should your weapon if you did any level of preparation for this fight. This is why that flying thing is such a big deal. It wouldn't really matter if the boss camped in the sky for a while, it would make the fight drag on. I'm so sorry, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. Thanks to this flight though, dealing that dragon damage is harder than it was in the first two phases, which is especially problematic because if you don't suppress Gog's power, you'll have to somehow survive this. Just like Fatalis' Giant Flame or Alatreon's Eschaton, this attack is basically a guaranteed card. That is of course unless you first weaken it by using enough dragon element. The weakened version of this attack can be blocked by Fabius, the aforementioned goat, and even by your own shield if you have one. With all of this together, especially that last phase, you can probably see why I said this fight feels so strict in how you have to approach it. While most bosses in this game have more broad and general problems that can be tackled in a variety of ways, Gogmazios has very clear rules. As a result, this ends up feeling like one of the most scripted hunts in the game. To understand what that means for the actual quality, we need to analyze 3 key ideas that define this encounter. It all starts with chaos. This is one of the most frantic fights in the entire game. In fact, if you pay attention in phase 3, you'll realize that the chaos itself is the boss, not the dragon. Take a look at this attack. This fire beam sees Gogmazios fly into the air and start spinning around as his laser tears through the field, scorching anything and everything in sight. But take another look. Did you see it? Every time Gog does this attack, there's a critical detail that you might not notice on your first attempt. I know I didn't. If you pay attention, you can see that it's going in the exact same pattern every time. It isn't aimed at anyone, let alone you. Now, I know what you're thinking. Okay, sure, but how does that change anything? It's still a death beam from the sky. Well, consider the following. If you already know where this beam is going to go, do you even have to look at the dragon firing it? You don't, do you? Despite how scary it may look, you could almost dodge this attack with your eyes closed. In short, it isn't really a threat. The explosions on the ground, however, absolutely are, especially if your gaze is turned skyward. This isn't the only fire beam like this either. It has some that sweep across the field and some that go vertically in a straight line, but the vast majority of them are incredibly easy to dodge in a vacuum if you just stay focused and don't panic. I mean, check out the side sweep. This attack takes several seconds before it reaches you, so don't worry about locking in and dodging that specifically. You've got plenty of time. Instead, look around you at the environment, make sure you're in a safe spot, maybe grab a compact anti-wyvern gun, and plan your next attack on the dragon when you get the chance. The fight feels astonishingly chaotic, yet if you're able to cut through all that noise, it's not too difficult. That's a pretty big if though, isn't it? You've got puddles of oil that'll slow down your movement to a crawl. They fall all around the arena almost randomly, and did I mention the absolute size of this boss? I mean, for one of its main attacks in phase 3, it just throws itself at you. But once again, all of these problems have solutions. You can use the Walker decoration to move through the oil faster, and the charge attack, while terrifying, can be used to bait the boss into going right under one of those giant boulders. All of this raises a question then. If it's this easy to circumvent all of this chaos, is this even a challenging boss? Let's take a look at the moveset to get an answer to that question. As previously mentioned, Gog is a fast boss, and it uses that speed along with its size to its advantage. It's got one attack that can be particularly deadly where it'll quickly slam one arm down, then follow up with a second swing. What makes this such a dangerous combo is the fact that both swings will cause a tremor that temporarily stuns you if you're near it. This means that even if you dodge the first swing, you're still almost guaranteed to get hit by the second thanks to the tremor. This combo becomes even more powerful in phase 3, where Gogmazios will add a third swing to it. The dragon rears up into the air before crashing down on anyone unlucky enough to find themselves in range. Furthermore, this attack has some pretty precise tracking on it, combined with a rather large AoE as well. On the topic of large AoEs, check out the fire beam. Obviously, the initial beam can deal plenty of damage by itself, but these explosions left in its wake can be just as threatening. If you get a bit too aggressive and try to run in or counter right after the beam, you'll get punished for it. Equally, if you find yourself on the back foot, this explosion could easily be the deciding factor that breaks through your last bit of defense. The developers delayed the detonation in a diabolical and devious way too. Watch this. If you Superman dive the moment you see this animation start to charge up, you'll get up and lose your iframes right in time to get caught by the explosion. It's subtle, but the devs didn't want you to merely dodge on reaction. They instead wanted you to slow down and wait for just the right moment. Comparing this dragon's moveset directly to lower tier monsters makes it pretty clear that the fight, at least on a fundamental level, is as hard as anything else we've faced so far. The explosions after the beams are reminiscent of Radao's endless follow-ups. This slam is similar to Magalas with an added tremor, and its tail swipe is just like Zoshia's, but once again, it's a bit more dangerous thanks to the follow-up explosions. Yet, interestingly, while all of this does make the boss notably more threatening, I don't think it's orders of magnitude more difficult than anything else in the game. There are countless safety nets in place here. I mean, even the first Nova can be avoided by standing on this cliff. It only works once, but if you fail to hit the DPS check the first time, the game will forgive you and grant you a second chance. I've got a theory though. This boss isn't really supposed to be challenging. Something I feel is often forgotten in discussions about games is what the developer is actually trying to do. What feeling are they trying to convey with this thing that they've created, and what are the most important attributes needed to create that feeling? Maybe this is just recency bias, but I feel difficulty has become the one and only answer lately. Yet there's so much more you can do with this medium. The sound design, the music, the graphics, the art style, the context of the story, all of these are just as important, if not more so, than difficulty. The Gogmazios fight is supposed to be a set piece, a spectacle, this grand finale of the base game that literally sends it off with a bang. It's more than that though. It calls back to everything we've seen in the base game while telling us one of the most interesting stories in the series. Let's start with that first part, since the way Capcom was able to capture this idea was genuinely brilliant. For a moment, think about what the main themes behind the gameplay of Wilds were. There are 3 of them that are perfectly represented here. Let's start with that question I told you to keep in mind at the start. Go ahead and grab your folder. You're kidding. What do you mean you lost it again? Okay, no, it's fine. I'm not mad. It's kind of important, so I thought you would. This is such a stupid bit. So remember our solutions? The one aspect that they all had in common was using things with the environment to even the odds against the colossal dragon. Much like World before it, Wilds is a game all about using the environment to our advantage. The vine traps in trees, the falling boulders, the slinger ammo that can be launched at smaller monsters to scare them away or turned into flash pods to temporarily blind larger ones. More than any game before it, World and now Wilds were all about evening the odds by working in tandem with the environment. That idea is on full display here as we find ourselves up against the largest monster in the game, and lore-wise, probably the most threatening as well. Second is adaptability. The amount of options you have in Monster Hunter borders on overwhelming. Not only are there 14 completely different and unique weapons, but within those 14 are endless builds and parameter-altering changes that you can make. You can play Rapid Morph Switch Axe with Wexploit and Crit Boost. You can play a defensive sword and shield with high elemental resistances and wide range to keep your party safe. You can play an evasion-focused lance build that uses iframes to dodge through anything you can't block, and all of these barely scratch the surface of what's possible here. Something I find we often overlook in these games is that our biggest advantage against the bosses that we face is not our skill in combat, it's our ability to perfectly build around whatever they can do. Yes, you could choose to lock in and spend 50 hours soloing Fatalis with a stick, but you could also just create an anti-Fatalis build that nullifies most of the major threats in the fight. Gogmazios asks us to take advantage of this adaptability in multiple different ways. The aforementioned oil puddles and tremors can be avoided with certain skills, and even the dragon's primary element of fire can be partially mitigated with enough fire resistance. However, the real threat here is that Nova. This will wipe the entire party if you're not careful, and the solution is, once again, adaptability. You have to bring multiple weapons to this fight and switch between them based on the state of the boss. Dragon to stop the Nova, and fire to weaken its defenses. Much like any challenging hunt in these games, you must prepare in such a way that you're ready to counter the monster's strengths and take advantage of their weaknesses. The final and most interesting attribute is the constantly changing environments. This was basically Wilds' main gimmick, much like the rampages in Rise or the tracking system in World. The seasons in Wilds go from fallow to inclemency to plenty. The fallow is basically just the default state of things with nothing particularly special happening. As time goes on, you'll eventually reach the most turbulent time with inclemency. This takes the form of sandy thunderstorms that block out the sun and typhoons that flood the entire area. This is then followed by the miraculous and wonderful plenty period. Farming is at an all-time high, the weather is peaceful, the land is renewed, and the people celebrate this triumphant time as they've managed to overcome the storm. Now, here's where it gets really cool. The Gogmazios fight takes place in a special part of the oil well basin, and it begins in this relatively empty cave. Nothing particularly special happening outside of the giant dragon, of course. However, after you deal enough damage, Gogmazios will decide that it's had enough and set the battlefield on fire. Living up to its title of Elder Dragon, this creature is so powerful that it effectively created a period of inclemency through its sheer strength alone. Phase 2 begins, and this part of the fight has a frantic gigantic, almost disadvantageous feel to it due to how small the arena has become. Equally, because you have to spend time dragging these cables, you're left wide open and far more vulnerable than before. It's uncomfortable by its very nature, and you even need to use cool drinks or chill mantle bugs to prevent your health from constantly draining due to the overwhelming heat. But the end of this phase is where things begin to shift. After unloading the conversion Elder Breaker directly into this thing's chest, it gets so upset that it simply fires one last beam at the near totally destroyed battlefield and flies off. In the third phase, we've exited the cave and arrived in the sun-soaked peak of the oil well basin, having both figuratively and literally risen above the chaos below. Gogmazios flies throughout as much of this phase as it can, but thanks to the compact anti-wyvern guns and the 8 hunters shooting at it, there's this feeling that the boss is losing, that the dragon will fall. Even when it goes all out and unleashes its most powerful attack, we don't run, nor do we stop it before it happens. We merely brush it off and keep attacking. With proof of a hero playing, this becomes by far the most triumphant part of the fight and even the game. The 3 phases here mirror the 3 phases of the game's environment, creating a boss that acts like an homage to the main ideas behind Wilds. All of this together, taking advantage of the environment, preparing and planning for the fight, and the area itself changing as the battle goes on, perfectly condense everything this game is about into one single boss. This leads us into the second part of why I'm so in love with this fight. The story that it tells. When I launched the game after Title Update 4 dropped, something stood out to me. Not the cool new monster, not the DLC, not the weapons, but the name of the Gogmazios quest itself. Spectre of Their Sins. The Spectre in this case is almost certainly Gogmazios, but who is the other subject in this quest title? Well, I think it has to be the people of Wyveria, and while their sins in this case could be a number of things, I'm inclined to believe it's their technology. More specifically, their willingness to disrupt the natural order in an attempt to gain whatever they desired. We can see this in the Guardians, synthetic immortal monsters that are programmed to protect Wyveria and are unable to do absolutely anything else. They don't eat, they don't sleep, they can't even reproduce. The people of this ancient civilization created life just to do their bidding. This stands in brilliant contrast to the other settlements around the Forbidden Lands who coexist alongside nature. Instead of using it, they work in harmony with it. The people of Kunafa realized at some point that Raidao is a natural predator to Doshagama, and so they use the fulgurite that it drops to ward off potential predators. The entire livelihood of Azus depends on the fire spring. This relationship worked great until Werner tried to bend this force of nature to his will. Only then did things go catastrophically wrong. Maybe the most telling point of all, though, is the fact that the villages who chose to coexist with nature look like this, and the ones that didn't ended up looking like this. To coexist is to survive, and to go against that rule while temporarily beneficial will guarantee your downfall. This is why that Spectre part is so important. Gogmazios is both metaphorically and physically carrying the sins of Wyveria, the Convergent Elder Breaker, a weapon that was likely powerful enough to slay Elder Dragons in a single shot back when it was fully functional, a weapon that's emblematic of the hubris Wyveria displayed. And now, all these years later, the people of Azus and perhaps the entire Forbidden Lands are in danger due to this apparition of the past, this ghost of Wyveria. It's almost as though nature itself still hasn't forgiven humanity for its transgressions, and has sent forth a Spectre to finish the job. What makes this idea even more interesting, though, is the form that Spectre takes. A dragon. In cultures around the world, across time, and even in the modern day, humanity has harbored this obsession with dragons. I think a large part of that comes from this idea of dragons acting more like representations than actual living beings. My favorite part of Fatalis and Iceborne was the fact that it felt like a fated showdown between destined rivals. Like Link and Ganondorf, Mario and Bowser, Cloud and Sephiroth, it was a battle between the strongest hunter and the strongest monster, and that's exactly what the fight felt like. Gogmazios, much like Fatalis, once again has that fated showdown feel to it. In its purest, most simple form, Gogmazios is a monster. I mean, look at this thing. There was something elegant and almost human about Fatalis' design, but Gog is just hideous. Yet there's something human here too. While Fatalis represents evil in its purest form, Gogmazios represents humanity's ugliness, the horrible things that they're capable of and the acts that they're willing to commit for the sake of greed and power. There's nothing elegant about war, it's random destruction and chaos, an idea that's perfectly displayed in this fight. Equally, Gogmazios represents this lack of harmony with nature that led to Wyveria's downfall. The discord between the natural world and Wyveria takes physical form in their ghost, a dragon coated in pitch black tar-like oil. Gogmazios doesn't look like a natural creature, and it isn't supposed to. The other half of this then is the hunter. The hunter in this series has always been a symbol of hope, an individual or group of individuals whose sole purpose is to stand against impossible odds and come out on top for the sake of the people. This is especially true in Wilds, where the default weapons and armor are literally called the Hope set. Subtle, I know. Hope is by its very nature both optimistic and progressive. To be hopeful is to look forward into the future. This is the context of our fight. Gogmazios is a hideous evil force of discord, a specter of the mistakes of the past, and it's facing off against the Hunter, a physical representation of harmony and hope for the future. It's a battle between the symbols of the very worst of humanity and the very best. If it wasn't already obvious, I love this fight. You could argue that it's held back by being as scripted as it is, but that script creates a level of significance. This colossal force of nature can't be defeated in the same way that a normal monster can. You have to fight it on its terms and play by its rules. Personally, I think my favorite dragon is still probably either Primordial Malzeno or Amatsu, but Gogmazios is astonishingly close, and if this encounter is any indication of the future updates, whether we like it or not, that question we're forced to ask may have a different answer sooner than we think. Now, depending on whether or not you're playing games for the right or wrong reason, you might not even reach this fight at all. Check out this video on that.